Hi, today we're going to talk about Jennifer's recent testing that we completed. The first test that we did was a IQ test. It's called the Reynolds Intellectual Assessment Scales, and it tests for verbal intelligence, nonverbal intelligence, and then they combine the two to give you a composite score. An average score ranges from 90 to 109, and that's considered your average IQ score. And Jennifer's verbal intelligence was 48, which is significantly below level, and her nonverbal intelligence was 56, which is significantly below average, and her composite, the two combined together, was 46, which again is significantly below level. We then take those scores from that test and we give her an achievement test. An achievement test basically says there are subtests that designed to measure the achievement of the students, and the early reading score skills test measures several areas like naming letters, letter correspondence, phonological awareness, and word reading comprehension. Then there's a math section that subtests measured untimed math problem solving skills, basic concepts like one-to-one correspondence, everyday applications, geometry, and algebra. So basically, does she know her numbers? Does she know how to count? Can she write her numbers? Those kinds of things. The numerical operations test is written math calculations, and it's basic skills, basics operations with numbers, geometry, algebra, and calculus. So her early reading skills was a 78, which is below average. Math problem skills is a 63, which is low. Numerical operations is 74, which is below average. They also gave her two achievement tests. The second one was the Woodcock-Johnson test of achievement, and it's measuring letter word identification and her ability to decode letters and words. It requires both identifying letters and words and applying phonemic or phonic and instructional analysis skills. The passage comprehension test measures her ability to listen to single words and context embedded in stimuli, and see if she can comprehend what's happening. The applied problems measures a skill in analyzing and solving practical problems, and the writing sample measures the examinee's skill in writing responses to a variety of demands. Her test scores from that were letter word identification was 102, which is really good. That's average. Passage comprehension was 90, which is average. Applied problems was 73, which is low, and writing samples is 91, which is average. The standard scores for that are between 85 and 115. So her scores were pretty much in the average for that. The third test they gave her was the Kaufman test of educational achievement, and it's an individually given test. All of these tests are given individually, just to her in front of the examiner and examiner only. The phonological processing subtest measures the student's ability to respond orally to items that require manipulating sounds. So rhyming, matching sound, blending sound, segmenting sounds, deleting sounds. Like the examiner might say cupcake, and then say that without the cake, and so they would have to say cup. And the naming facility, the RAND subtest is to name objects, colors, and letters as quickly as possible, and it's like a color test, and they have to go through and name the colors as quickly as they can, and it's timed. And so her phonological processing was 52, which is lower extreme, and her object naming facility was 97, which is average. So then they also did a test of auditory processing skills, and that's used for understanding language commonly used in everyday academics and activities. Word discrimination takes them to say, they'll say like two words like dip and dope. Are those the same or are those different? And they would have to say they were the same. Or they might say man. Are those the same or different? And they would say they're the same. So the similarities and differences between the words. It says Elizabeth Jennifer didn't understand the instructions when given that test, so they couldn't complete that test. The Bender Visual Motor measures visual motor integration skills, so what the child sees and what they can write at the same time. The student is asked to copy each presented design as accurately as possible. She received a standard score of 106, which is in the average range. And then she was also given the Kaufman Survey of Early Academic and Language Skills, and it's 20 items that assess number skills and 20 items that assess pre-reading skills. So her number skills, she received an 82, which is below average. Her letter and word skills was 94, which is average. And her number, letter, and word skills is 89, which is below average. Her teacher also did an assessment, functional skills assessment on her, and she reported that she has problems, Jennifer has problems following directions, and she doesn't understand a lot of vocabulary that she uses in the everyday classroom. And she can't follow most of the directions in order to complete classroom work on her own. She doesn't really interact with her behavior and social interaction. She doesn't really interact very well with the other students. She has a tendency to mumble and is hard to understand, and she doesn't, when she's playing with them, she kind of mimics what they're doing. She doesn't actually play with them. She can't, for her personal independence, she can't do much for herself. She can't use the scissors by herself. She waits to see what other people do before she just starts to do it. She doesn't initiate things on her own. She has accidents at recess because she doesn't want to stop playing, and then she doesn't go and tell a teacher. She just waits until an adult notices, and then they send her to the office to get her pants changed. She's in her academic skills, she's very far behind academically. She copies the work of the person next to her and to get her work done. So they take how they determine whether she has whether she qualifies for SPED or not is that they take her IQ score, which her composite, well, usually they use the highest score that they have, which in her case is the nonverbal intelligence score, which is a 56. And they take her achievement scores and they determine if she's achieving as high as her IQ says that she can. Based on Jennifer's IQ and her abilities as in the classroom academically and personally, in what she can do functionally by herself and how independent she is and all that, she qualifies under the criteria of intellectual disability, or mentally retarded is what we used to call it. And because she has a significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning, and she has a lot of deficits in her adaptive behavior, which is how she can function in a classroom or function in the real world. So we are going to develop an IEP that takes care of those areas in order for her to get the best services possible. Her speech language scores were also low. She has her ability to communicate with people in functional language or even academic language is extremely low, and so she meets the criteria for speech language impairment as well as for intellectual disability. Thank you.